In a case that could rival any Hollywood horror film, dozens of teenage boys were abducted, subjected to hours of torture, and ultimately murdered in cold blood. For the perpetrator, the killings were not only acts of control, but also a disturbing source of arousal. Obsessed with power, he often targeted multiple victims in a single night. Unlike many criminals, he harbored a chilling secret. Beneath his home lay a hidden graveyard. He became known as the original Killer Clown, the real-life monster who inspired countless stories and films about evil lurking behind a facade of whimsy. The setting was Chicago, Illinois, in the mid-1970s. Norwood Park, a quiet neighborhood just a short drive from O'Hare International Airport, seemed peaceful on the sunny day of 1975 when one 8-year-old Johnny Bukovich, accompanied by 2 friends, arrived at the office of PDM Contractors. The company often employed young, inexperienced workers to save money, sometimes even withholding pay. Frustrated and fed up, Johnny confronted the owner. "Open up, come on, man. I know you're in there. Johnny, you need to pay me right now," he demanded. The argument dragged on for hours. The owner insisted it was a simple accounting error, promising the money was forthcoming. Johnny threatened to expose his boss's unethical business practices, but despite the heated exchange, the young men eventually left empty-handed. What should have been the end of the confrontation turned into the beginning of a nightmare. Shortly after leaving, Johnny vanished without a trace. The following morning, his parents grew increasingly worried. His father discovered Johnny's car abandoned just a few blocks from home with the keys still in the ignition. Knowing how much his son loved the car and how careful he usually was, the scene felt deeply wrong. At Chicago's 14th Precinct, Officer Burkhardt received an urgent call. Upon inspecting the vehicle, he found more than just the keys. Johnny's checkbook sat in the glove compartment, and his wallet full of cash remained untouched in the center console. Everything pointed to the fact that Johnny had not left voluntarily. Despite these suspicious signs, there was no immediate proof of foul play. Officer Burkhardt returned to the station to file a report, but weeks passed without any leads. Johnny's parents, however, refused to relent. His father continuously contacted the police, determined to uncover what had happened. The investigation revealed one crucial detail. Johnny had recently argued over wages with his employer. The police spoke to the contractor, a respected businessman and well-known member of the community, a person no one would suspect. The contractor admitted Johnny had visited with friends and confirmed they left his home without incident. Beyond that, Johnny's path became a baffling and haunting mystery. Over the next 3 years, the same unsettling pattern continues to unfold across Chicago. One young man after another disappears, and the cases that are reported to police remain unsolved. It is the 1972nd, a time when hitchhiking is common and many people drift from place to place without checking in. Because of that freedom of movement, it becomes difficult for investigators to pinpoint exactly where someone vanished or even when they were last seen. For a predator hunting human beings, Chicago during this era offers endless opportunity. Block after block is filled with teenagers and young men willing to catch a ride with almost anyone, especially if the driver promises drugs. Offenders often target a particular kind of victim, someone vulnerable, isolated, and unlikely to be searched for right away. People involved in prostitution, young men exchanging sex for money, drifters looking for temporary work, or individuals far from home with no support system are all at high risk. These are people who can disappear without immediate alarm. 3 years after Johnny Bukovich vanished, 26-year-old Jeffrey Rignall bursts into a Chicago police station, terrified and bruised. His face alone tells the officers something terrible has occurred. "There's a guy trying to kill me," he blurts out. "And I think he almost did." Detectives prepare for the worst as they question him. Rignall explains that 2 days earlier, he had been walking home from a friend's place when he noticed a large black sedan trailing him. The driver rolled down the window and casually offered him a chance to get high. "You want to get high?" the man asked. The stranger appeared friendly. relaxed, even generous. Believing he had nothing to fear, Rignall climbed into the car without hesitation. Serial predators are often skilled at reading people. They study their potential targets, search for weaknesses, and quickly learn what the person wants, whether it is a ride, drugs, companionship, or simply attention. Once they know what to offer, they work to lower the victim's guard and isolate them. But the moment the car pulled away from the curb, everything changed. The driver lunged forward, pressing a rag over Rignall's nose and mouth. The cloth was soaked in a sweet-smelling chemical, likely chloroform, strong enough to knock a person unconscious within seconds. Rignall had walked into a nightmare that countless others never escaped. During the drive, he wakes intermittently, catching fleeting glimpses of streetlights and highway signs. Each time, the kidnapper presses the rag back over his face, plunging him into unconsciousness. When he finally regains awareness, he finds himself inside the predator's home, stripped, restrained, and at the mercy of the man who had seemed so harmless before. That friendly face has twisted into a sinister, obscene grin. The attacker grabs a blunt object from the floor and begins his assault. For hours, Jeffrey Rignall endures rape, beatings, and whippings at the hands of the sadistic man. Chloroform is used repeatedly to knock him out, only for him to awaken to the same terror again and again. After countless hours of torment, in a rare and inexplicable act, the abductor leaves Rignall in a park, alive, but unconscious, battered, and disoriented. Jeffrey immediately goes to the police to report the attack. He can only recall fragments. The assailant was a white man with a mustache and drove a black Osmo. He remembers an exit sign on the expressway, but that's all. Despite the severity of the crime, detectives have little to go on. Without a name, address, or detailed description, the information is too vague to launch a concrete investigation. Frustrated by the lack of progress, Rignall decides to take action himself. He sets up a stakeout at the highway exit he remembers, determined to catch a glimpse of the man who nearly killed him. It was a long shot. Thousands of cars passed along the busy expressway every day, but Rignall hoped to spot the single vehicle that had brought him into his nightmare. The odds of sitting in one spot with no knowledge of the predator's habits and actually seeing the same car were extremely slim. Most detectives would never attempt such a plan, but Rignall saw no other choice. He only knew one thing for certain: the location where he had been abducted. Weeks stretched into months with no sign of the black Oldsmobile. Just as he was about to give up, he finally spotted it heading northwest into the suburbs. He could hardly believe it. It was definitely the same car. Quietly, he followed it into Norwood Park. When the vehicle stopped outside 8213 Summerdale Avenue, Rignall was certain he had found the house where he had been attacked and tortured. Armed with the license plate and the address, he went straight to the police. They quickly identified the man behind his abduction, John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was a prominent public figure, a respected Chicago businessman living in a comfortable suburban home with his wife and 2 stepdaughters. Well known in the community, he maintained a strong reputation, was active in politics, and even served as a precinct captain. Unlike many predators, he did not hide. He was confident and comfortable in plain sight, carefully establishing himself in ways that made him appear beyond suspicion. He was even photographed with First Lady Rosalind Carter, using his public image to shield his dark secret. In his free time, Gacy cultivated another persona as Pogo the Clown, a character he created for the Jolly Joker Clown Club. Wearing a costume and face paint, he entertained children at birthday parties and local hospitals, presenting himself as friendly and approachable. This public persona reinforced the perception that he was just an ordinary, helpful neighbor, masking the sinister reality behind the cheerful facade. 3 years ago, one 8-year-old Johnny Buovich vanished, and the police briefly questioned Gay. At the time, his strong reputation in the community and the lack of any direct connection to Johnny's disappearance led authorities to dismiss him as a suspect almost immediately. Now, however, there is someone who claims to have evidence. Rignall has witnessed a darker side of Gacy, yet without another witness to confirm it, the case remains shaky. In the Jeffrey Rignall matter, the only charge that police can bring against him is battery, a minor offense that carries a maximum fine of just $100 and no jail time. Despite this, Rignall's anger is clear, questioning why investigators ask questions but take no immediate action. Adding to the complexity, months have passed between the initial attack and the subsequent arrest. During that time, any physical evidence that could support either Rignall's or Gacy's account has likely disappeared, making the case especially difficult to prove. Essentially, it boils down to one person's word against another, with little to no forensic evidence to back either side. Gacy is eventually arrested for the battery charge. Yet, as is common in many similar cases, this does not mean he will remain in custody. He is released while awaiting trial, a scenario far from unusual. During this extended period, Gacy's misdemeanor case is pending, and he largely slips from police attention. Privately, his behavior may be troubling, but publicly, he continues to be regarded as a respectable member of the community. For the police, John Wayne Gacy's extensive community service paints him as a model citizen. Yet, his accuser, Jeffrey Wignall, has openly told authorities that he is bisexual, a revelation that, in the late 1970 seconds, immediately casts him as a sexual deviant in the eyes of many at Chicago's 14th Precinct. Meanwhile, every few weeks, officers receive calls from the worried parents of Johnny Bukovich, the young boy who had worked for Gacy and mysteriously vanished 3 years earlier following an argument. "You need to pay me right now," his parents recall him saying, but Johnny was never seen again. He is just one of many 19 young men have disappeared in Chicago alone, and countless others are never reported. Those who are reported are often quickly dismissed as runaways. If these cases are connected, the lack of witnesses makes linking them nearly impossible. Police officers, spread across multiple precincts and jurisdictions, often have no way of recognizing patterns between disappearances. This creates a significant obstacle for law enforcement. Many cases may be related, but without communication or centralized tracking, the connections go unnoticed. Remember, this is the 1970 seconds. It's a time before the internet, before advanced computers, and before the forensic technologies we take for granted today, such as DNA analysis. Social media and smartphones do not exist, so there is no digital trail to help locate missing persons. In this era, someone could vanish with almost no trace, leaving investigators to rely on sparse, often unreliable leads. Then came a lead that could finally shed light on these baffling disappearances. "My son is missing," pleaded a frightened mother. 9 months after Rignall's brutal abduction, Des Plaines, Illinois officer Ron Adams took a statement from Elizabeth Past. Her 5-year-old son, Robert, had vanished, and unlike many previous cases, he was a model child with no reason to run away. Robert Pye stood out among the other missing boys. He was deeply connected to his family, close to his parents, and lived a predictable life. His parents knew his routines and expected when he would be home. So, when he went missing, even for a short period, alarm bells rang immediately. Earlier that evening, Mrs. Past had been preparing to drive Robert home from his job at a local pharmacy when he asked her to wait a little longer. "I need to meet someone about a new summer job," he explained. "It pays twice as much as the pharmacy. Really good money, Ma. Just 2 minutes." "Curious?" she asked. "Who are you meeting?" Robert gave no clear answer and quickly ran off to speak with the potential employer. That was the last time anyone saw him. What began as a brief delay turned into a parent's worst nightmare. Mrs. Past had no idea how real and how terrifying her fears would become. Her son's current boss provided a crucial detail: the name of the man Robert had gone to see. "I had a guy in here earlier," he explained. "He was asking about some shelving." When asked if he was a contractor, the boss confirmed, "Yeah, John Gay." That night at the precinct, police took Mrs. Past's story very seriously. Robert had gone to meet this man and never returned. Lieutenant Joe Kosenczak, the chief of detectives at Des Plaines PD, felt the case personally. He had a teenage son who attended the same high school as Robert, and he could easily imagine the fear and anxiety Mrs. Past was experiencing. It was almost as if he were searching for his own child. Using the name John Gay and the phone number provided by Robert's employer, Kosenczak contacted Chicago Police Headquarters to see if this contractor had a criminal record. What he discovered was deeply troubling. After reviewing records from multiple precincts, he found that John Wayne Gay had a serious history of crimes involving young men and boys. Detectives know that serial offenders often have a specific type of victim in mind. When patterns emerge similar ages, genders, or other traits, it raises red flags. Gay's record included the recent case of 6-year-old Jeffrey Rignall, which was still pending trial. But there was more. 10 years earlier, Gay had been convicted in Iowa for sodomizing a 5-year-old boy the same age as Robert. He had served only 18 months of a 10-year sentence. Clearly, relocating to another state and cultivating a reputation as a respected citizen had not curbed his predatory behavior. Gay seemed to operate with his own moral code. He understood what was legal and illegal, but chose to act without regard for the law, motivated by what gave him pleasure. Detective Kosenczak knew that Robert's life was in immediate danger. Every passing second made the situation more urgent, and there was no time to waste. It's no exaggeration to say that the first 48 hours of an investigation are crucial. During that time, evidence is most likely to be preserved, and every passing hour increases the risk that it could deteriorate, especially if it's biological, or be destroyed by a suspect. Acting quickly isn't just about identifying who committed the crime. It's about securing the clues that can ultimately prove it. Detective Kosenczak, accompanied by another officer, headed to John Gay's home on Summerdale Avenue. Their goal was to question the man in person and, if they were fortunate, to find Robert Past safe inside. "Mr. John Gay?" Kosenczak called as they approached the door. "Yes," Gay responded, opening it. But the house was empty, no sign of Robert. "Have you spoken with him?" Kosenczak asked. "No, I haven't," Gay replied. He claimed he had no knowledge of the missing boy and explained that his uncle had just passed away. He insisted he had no time to discuss a teenager he'd never met and wanted the detectives to leave so he could be with his grieving mother. Kosenczak remained unconvinced. Something about Gay's explanation didn't add up. Detectives often rely on subtle clues: what someone says, what they avoid saying, their tone, their expressions. These small details can be just as telling as physical evidence. In Kosenczak's view, Gay was hiding something. "I need you to come down to the station, sir," Kosenczak said firmly. Gay hesitated, but eventually agreed. Reluctantly, he consented to provide a formal statement later that evening, leaving the detectives with a sense that the investigation had only just begun. Gacy's criminal history made his potential connection to Robert Past's disappearance deeply alarming. Yet, it also offered Lieutenant Kosenczak a glimmer of hope. While Gacy was clearly a sexual predator, there was no evidence suggesting he was a killer, at least not yet. Robert might still be alive, but time was running out. Kosenczak knew he needed a search warrant, but obtaining one in cases like this is never easy. Investigators must establish probable cause before they can search a property for evidence, and when starting with limited information, that can be extremely challenging. The stakes were high. This offender wasn't likely to stop, and every move had to be calculated. Kosenczak's immediate concern was clear: how to identify Gacy and prevent him from striking again. The lieutenant contacted the state's attorney. Physical evidence was scarce, but Gacy's criminal record, combined with witness testimony confirming that Robert had gone to see him just before vanishing, was sufficient to secure the warrant. Later that day, when Gacy arrived to make a formal statement, he appeared calm and self-assured. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. In his mind, he was untouchable. "There's no way the police are going to catch me," he seemed to think. "I'm just that good." It was exactly this arrogance that would ultimately work against him. Kosenczak served him the warrant and requested the keys to Gacy's house and vehicles. Gacy's reaction was explosive, revealing more than he intended. "You can't do this! You can't have my keys! I know your boss! I'll ruin your careers!" His fury made it clear there were things in his possession he desperately did not want investigators to see. "Here's a fully rewritten, clear, and human-like version of your passage. Gay was clearly intelligent and cunning, but there was something even more unsettling about him. He seemed to believe he had more experience in these matters than the very people investigating him. His boldness was palpable, brazen, almost cocky. He left gaps in his story and didn't bother covering all his tracks. There was a chilling comfort in the way he operated, a sense that he felt untouchable. With Gacy at the station, Lieutenant Kosenczak made his way to the contractor's home. His heart pounded. Nearly 2 days had passed since one 5-year-old Robert Past vanished, likely trapped by a predator like Gay. Kosenczak dared not assume Robert was unharmed, but he clung to the hope that the boy was still alive. Inside the house, Kosenczak and the other detectives spread out, methodically searching every room. Detectives work by connecting the dots, looking for evidence that links a victim to a suspect, especially when the suspect denies knowing the victim or claims no extended contact. They search for anything that could betray a lie. Personal belongings, clothing, jewelry, any item that might tie the suspect to the missing child. Their search revealed a disturbing collection: pornographic videos, magazines, and sex toys. Each discovery painted a clearer picture of Gay's depraved interests, further confirming the danger Robert faced and the urgency of the investigation. Among the items discovered was a set of nickel-plated handcuffs and something far more disturbing: a 2x4 with restraints at either end, a device that could easily be used for sexual torture. But the evidence didn't stop there. In the kitchen trash, detectives found a film-developing receipt from Nissan Pharmacy, where Robert Past had worked. Gay also possessed a suspicious collection of personal items that clearly didn't belong to him. A class ring engraved with the initials Jazz, underwear far too small for a man his size, and a blue hooded coat similar to one Robert had worn the night he vanished. While examining a closet, Kosenczak discovered something even more unexpected: a trap door leading beneath the house. Slowly, he lifted it, imagining the worst Robert could be trapped below. Or worse. The space underneath was dank and musty, a crawlspace that could easily be mistaken for a tomb. Yet the dirt appeared undisturbed, and there was no sign of the boy. Carefully, the team collected the evidence and left Gay's home. Knowing what they had already uncovered was chilling, but not yet enough to make an arrest. Kosenczak still needed definitive proof that Robert had been there. Determined to keep the predator under close watch, he instructed his team to follow Gay day and night. When a suspect believes he is cleverer than his pursuers, surveillance can actually work to an investigator's advantage. Gay's arrogance might provoke him to act, revealing more than he intended. Kosenczak also began digging into Gay's past. He contacted Gay's ex-wife, Carol, for insight. She revealed a disturbing portrait of the man she had married. During their relationship, he frequently went out without explanation, and as the marriage deteriorated, he stopped hiding his sexual predilections, even openly describing the type of young men he preferred. Carol recalled his extreme mood swings and occasional violent outbursts, but learning the full scope of his sexual appetites changed everything. It confirmed the depth of the danger Robert faced and underscored just how cunning and predatory Gay truly was. And there was more. Carol, Gay's ex-wife, revealed to Lieutenant Kosenczak that a former employee of Gay, Johnny Buovich, had also disappeared under mysterious circumstances. "You need to pay me right now," Buovich had demanded before vanishing. At the time, Gay had been questioned and dismissed as a suspect. But now the case took on a far more sinister light. The list of missing boys connected to him was growing steadily. Kosenczak got a crucial break when Robert Past's mother checked in with new information. She remembered that on the night her son disappeared, a co-worker had placed a Nissan Pharmacy film-developing receipt into the pocket of Robert's blue coat. Kosenczak's heart raced as he rushed to the evidence table. There, it was a receipt from Nissan Pharmacy, tucked in an evidence bag. It was the smoking gun he had been searching for. A quick call to the pharmacy confirmed the match. The numbers on the receipt found in Gay's home perfectly corresponded with the film envelope from the store. Gay had claimed he never even met Robert, but the evidence proved otherwise. Robert Past had been in Gay's home, and Kosenczak was now certain that Gay was responsible not only for Robert's disappearance but likely for several other missing young men. Yet without a body or definitive proof that Robert had been harmed, obtaining a second search warrant would be difficult. Remarkably, Gay unknowingly aided the investigation. He became increasingly cocky, even inviting officers into his home, believing he was in complete control. There was a dangerous cat-and-mouse dynamic developing. Gay flaunted his confidence, almost daring the detectives to catch him.
"Well, fellas, what can I do for you?"
Gay asked casually. Kosenczak kept his tone measured. "We appreciate you giving us a moment of your time, Mr. Gay. Just a couple of routine questions, hoping you might be able to help us out." The lieutenant's goal was clear: develop enough probable cause to secure a new search warrant. Even if Gay thought he was clever enough to avoid detection, Kosenczak knew that by accepting the invitation inside, he had given them a valuable opportunity to search for the pieces of evidence they needed. "How's business going, by the way?" Kosenczak asked. "Oh, it's good," Gay replied smoothly. "Business is booming." Gay continued to boast as he spoke with the detectives. "I've got about 15 employees right now," he said. "It keeps me busy, but it also takes me away from my true passion." Soon, the conversation turned to one of his more unusual hobbies, clowning. "I'm a professional clown on weekends," he admitted, "for charities and kids' parties. Pogo the Clown." Then, almost casually, he revealed just how little he feared the law. "Oh yeah, detective," he said with a grin. "A clown can get away with murder." As one officer kept him talking, another stepped away. Just as the officer flushed the bathroom, the heating vents suddenly kicked on. A strange, sickly sweet, putrid odor filled the room. It was unmistakable. It was coming from under the house. For Kosenczak, the moment was bone-chilling. Investigators quickly learned the distinct smell of death. Even without prior experience at a crime scene, attending an autopsy makes it unmistakable. Once you recognize it, you never forget it. And this was it. The unmistakable stench of a corpse. That was all Lieutenant Kosenczak needed. Between Gay's criminal record involving young boys, the matching Nissan pharmacy film receipt, and now the deadly odor rising from beneath the house, he had enough evidence to secure a second search warrant. Meanwhile, Gay's behavior grew increasingly erratic, as if he sensed the net tightening around him. He drove recklessly, and in one shocking moment, stopped, approached a stranger, and slid a bag of drugs into the man's pocket right in front of the police. Gay's arrogance was staggering. Narcissistic and self-assured, he believed he was untouchable, certain that the authorities had no power over him. Ironically, it was this reckless act, a minor drug offense, that provided the final opportunity for the police to arrest him, even as the mounting evidence pointed to his involvement in the disappearances of several young men. With Gay now in custody and a new search warrant in hand, Lieutenant Kosenczak returns to the house, this time accompanied by a full team of evidence technicians. There's no question where the search will begin: the crawl space beneath the home. This is still technically a missing person case, which means investigators are searching for the one thing every detective dreads: a body. And after smelling what they believed was the unmistakable odor of death rising from below, Kosenczak fears exactly what they're about to uncover. The team begins digging through the hard-packed earth. Almost immediately, they uncover something that confirms their worst fears: a human bone. And the deeper they dig, the grimmer the discovery becomes. It isn't one victim. It isn't two. It's dozens. Gay had created a hidden graveyard beneath his own house. When people read about cases like this in the news, the horror is often summarized in a few lines. But the reality is different for those who must confront it in person. Detectives and technicians have to sift through the soil, move remains, examine bones, each step requiring them to come face to face with brutality on a level that defies imagination. These are the crime scenes that stay with investigators for the rest of their lives. The evidence makes one thing painfully clear: Gay was so arrogant, so convinced of his own superiority, that he believed he could bury his victims on his own property without ever being caught. In his mind, hiding the bodies under his own house wasn't a risk, it was a point of control. He knew where they were. He assumed the police never would. Back at police headquarters, Kosenczak finally confronts him. "Mr. Gay, we've found multiple bodies." Gay shows no reaction, no shock, no fear, no remorse. Kosenczak finds himself staring into the hollow, emotionless eyes of a true psychopath. One of the defining traits of such individuals is a complete lack of empathy, an inability to care about the pain, suffering, or death of their victims. And as Kosenczak looks across the table, it's painfully obvious. Gay simply does not care. To someone like Gay, the only thing that matters is his own gratification. If inflicting pain excites him, he'll do it without hesitation. Taking a life means almost nothing to him. In his mind, victims are inconvenient objects, people he believes had it coming. Even after officers uncovered a mass grave beneath his home, Gay shows no emotional reaction. The enormity of what he has done doesn't touch him in the slightest. Instead, he speaks in a cold, casual tone, even describing his methods as if sharing a hobby. "I showed him the rope trick," he says, almost proudly. He explains that using only his hands allows victims to fight back too much. So he preferred a rope tightened with a stick, twisted like a crude tourniquet. For him, restraining and killing was not only efficient, but pleasurable. In Gay's world, only his feelings matter. The victim's terror means nothing. Each young man is simply a tool he uses for his own enjoyment. And once he is finished, the body becomes just another piece of trash to dispose of. He describes throwing Robert P.'s body off a bridge like garbage. He explains it as though he were discarding something unwanted, because to him, that's all the boy ever was. "There was no space left under the house," he says flatly, as if that were the only reason he didn't bury him there. For serial predators like Gay, people are objects, things to use, break, and discard. There is no empathy, no guilt, no pause. They can strangle a young man in a horrific and painful way, and minutes later feel nothing at all. At last, Lieutenant Kosenczak has heard enough. "You're under arrest," he says, disgust sharpening every word. He reads Gay his rights, formally charging him with murder. The true scale of the horror beneath Gay's home is almost beyond comprehension. Investigators ultimately discover 27 victims. 26 were buried in the crawl space, and another was found hidden beneath the concrete floor of the garage. A silent graveyard created by a man who felt nothing. The body is identified as Johnny Bukovic, the young man who vanished 3 years earlier after a heated confrontation with Gay. When you look at the crime through the lens of power and control, the picture becomes even darker. Even in death, Gay maintains possession of his victims. Their bodies lie directly beneath his home, exactly where he wants them. He knows where they are. He alone controls them. For a predator like him, that is the ultimate domination. But the victims beneath the house account for only part of the horror. Gay admits he eventually ran out of space and strength. Digging graves under the crawl space was physically exhausting, so he began disposing of bodies in the Des Plaines River instead. At one point, he even considered hiding victims in his attic, but decided it would create problems later. Dumping them in the river became his easiest solution. He would simply drive to a bridge at night and throw the bodies over the side. When asked how many he discarded this way, he can't remember or refuses to. One body police urgently want to recover is Robert P. From the beginning, the entire investigation revolved around finding the missing teenager. The search teams scour the river for months, pulling body after body from the water. And then, finally, they find him. In a heartbreaking twist, Robert's remains are located in a section of the river that he and his father once paddled together in a canoe. The discovery brings painful but much-needed closure to his family and to Lieutenant Kosenczak, who has lived and breathed this case for months. Now, at last, Guy will face justice. In March 1980, after 5 weeks of testimony and more than 100 witnesses, the jury begins deliberating. There is no question that Gay murdered these boys, he confessed. The only issue left is whether he was legally insane when he committed the crimes. Gay's defense argues he was mentally ill and therefore not responsible for his actions. But the prosecution points to his behavior, the careful planning, the consistency of his methods, the precise way he carried out each attack. His pattern is unmistakable. His approach is deliberate. Nothing about it is random or out of control. Insanity becomes his last, desperate attempt at escape. Gay's careful planning revealed that he was clever, not insane. Any time he deviated slightly from his established pattern, he exposed himself to risk, but the methodical way he operated was the hallmark of someone calculating, not out of control. In just 2 hours, the jury returned their decision. We, the jury, find the defendant, John Wayne Gay, guilty on all 33 counts of first-degree murder. What is most striking about Gay and many serial killers is how completely unsuspected they often are until investigators dig beneath the surface. People struggle to reconcile the image of a familiar, everyday individual with the horrifying acts they committed. Really? You're telling me this is the same man I go to business meetings with? The same one I've seen at political fundraisers? The guy I know? It shocks friends, neighbors, and colleagues alike. When the public confronts a case like this, there is a desire to see the monster in the crime to match the brutality with the offender's outward appearance. But that rarely happens. These killers are successful because they don't look monstrous at all. They blend in, appearing ordinary, even respectable. They are your next-door neighbor, the friendly man walking his dog, tending his garden, or exchanging polite greetings in the morning. That is the public face they allow everyone to see. The private, hidden life, the one filled with dark impulses and horrific acts, is invisible to the outside world. That disconnect between the friendly neighbor and the cold-blooded murderer is what shocks people the most. And it is this duality that makes individuals like Gay so terrifying. People want to believe that if they saw a serial killer, they could recognize one. The truth is, you almost never can. That's precisely why killers like Gay are so terrifyingly successful. They don't look like monsters. They look ordinary. They look like anyone you might meet on the street. In fact, they are often the opposite of what we expect a serial offender to be. After his trial, it was recommended that John Wayne Gay be executed. Considered one of the most vicious serial killers in U.S. history, he faced the ultimate penalty. Even as the lethal injection began, he maintained his defiance, spitting insults and asserting control to the very end. That arrogance, that sense of dominance, had defined his entire career of terror. Gay's horrific crimes, the unrelenting sexual abuse of young men, the sadistic torture, the mass murders, and his bizarre obsession with clowns have left a lasting mark on culture. His fascination with a seemingly innocent entertainer has reshaped the way we perceive clowns forever. The image of the evil clown, now a staple of horror and Halloween, can trace its roots directly back to him. It is a chilling reminder of the duality of human nature. A mass grave of missing boys, grotesque sexual cruelty, and a clown-obsessed murderer hidden behind the face of a normal man. These events are horrifying precisely because they shouldn't exist, but they did. This is the true story of John Wayne Gay, the original killer clown, whose crimes revealed the darkness lurking just beneath the surface of everyday life.